Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Straight Talk, sponsored by Inglis and Darley. My name's Brent O'Brien, and joining me, as per usual, is Tim Rowe. This week, we feature an in-depth chat with Victoria Racing Club CEO Kylie Rogers, looking at the possible changes to syndication in Australia. Ask if cutting meetings is the way to future prosperity for the racing industry, and chat the vexed issue of the future of our derbies. In breeding and bloodstock, how strong is the private mares market? We look at Wodeton's introduction to Newgate. How much is a Group 1 winning stallion prospect worth on the open market? We're about to find out. Finally, in wagering, how much does the World Cup mean to the betting industry? And plus the global challenges of the illegal betting market. Tim, let's get stuck into it. The future of race clubs is a topic we often speak about here on the Straight and on Straight Talk, whether it be the ATC, whether it be the BTC, whether it be the MRC, whether it be the VRC, whatever C you want to sail on, you'll find your way there. It's an interesting sort of era with, I guess, PRAs have become a lot more powerful probably across the last 10 or 15 years in terms of the money they've got. It's left clubs that are primarily asset rich, but arguably probably cash poor. I mean, in your thoughts, what does it look like in 10 years' time for these clubs? What are we heading towards, do you feel?
Well, in Victoria, will there be mergers? Obviously, there's a section of the industry or stakeholders that would like to see that happen, and then arguably others that have watched the ATC, sort of STC, AGC merger unfold over the past sort of 15 or so years or more, question whether that's the right thing in independence and, what's best for the members. At the end of the day, they are member clubs. What is best for the members? And I'm sure there'll be some consolidation and shared resources and trying to cut down on administration costs, but every club's slightly different, particularly VRC probably doesn't have the assets the MRC does with the number of poker machines and pubs and different things like that. And obviously, haven't heard your interview yet with Kylie Rogers, but in terms of, they built the big stand and, probably unfortunate timing with the pandemic and the amount of costs and different things like that, and they're digging their way out of it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, you look at the ATC and their challenges. We've obviously spoken at length about what happened with Rose Hill and challenges at Randwick and stabling and all that type of stuff. Yeah, talking to Kylie about the VRC, it's 127 hectares, I think. Okay, excuse me if I didn't get my my measurements quite right, but yeah, a round of land that is primarily designed to be run as an event space 21 times a year when they host race meetings. But, that's a very small part of the year. I remember having a conversation with someone at Moonee Valley saying, the percentage of, I think, 15 race meetings they run a year, small amount of race meetings per year based upon the footprint that they offer. Like it's a challenge for racing clubs because they're very much seen as needing to, I guess, execute a strategy which enables them to make the most of that. And I had an extensive chat with Kylie Rogers. It was late last week, but I've taken a bit of time this week to write the article. There'll be a extensive feature article on the Straight on this tomorrow morning, Friday morning. But I sort of opted to clip some of the audio up, particularly the back end, which she started talking about the challenges of balancing tradition and innovation, which has become a real challenge with race clubs.
It is incumbent upon any sports administrator to innovate, come up with change and new ideas that bring the youth to the sport. And that is what we're doing now. It is hard to make change, and as long as I am articulating to our members why we are making this change, making sure they understand our strategy, they may not like it, but they respect it. And that is all I ask, because I'm never going to be able to please 35,000, but as long as they understand why we're making these changes and it's for the benefit of the club, holistically, so we are thriving, then they will understand it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, the response from our members to the Carlton draft announcement or Hussar is an example of the majority there were like, yes, now we like that, we get that, thank you. But not every decision will have that majority view.
Part of it in this industry too is not obviously, Flemington / VRC is not an island. You operate in a broader industry which has its own politics and its own, I guess, difficulties in getting cut through that. You work, obviously AFL is, divided by clubs and all that sort of stuff. So you've worked in environments before like that, but how have you sort of coped with the politics and I guess sometimes the personal nature of it, Kylie, and trying to sort of, I guess, keep your head above water when it is an industry that there's a lot going on. There's a lot of shots being fired.
Yeah, that's anywhere in life. And I have to say, I've only been 2 years in the job, but we have an unbelievable relationship with RV.
Yeah.
We work very collaboratively with them. We work very collaboratively with our fellow metro and country clubs. I have great relationships with the CEOs and the boards of all of them. And I think our industry is working really hard to do more together than they ever have before.
Yeah. I mean, there's a particular one this year is obviously you're hosting Cox Plate Day this year. That's obviously, involves a lot of cooperation with Moonee Valley.
That's a perfect example. We are so privileged to host Cox Plate for Moonee Valley Racing Club, and we're really thankful to the Moonee Valley Racing Club board directors for allowing our members to attend their day at our track. I'm at pains to say that it is their race day.
Yeah.
And Michael will articulate when he's ready the initiatives that he's going to bring to life, and we will help him bring them to life. But it is his day, and we're working really closely with them and really well with them to put on what will be an historic day.
How difficult is it to sort of balance the priorities of hosting for another club or using your venue or making your venue available 7 days out from your own biggest 4 days a year, where that's so crucial to everything that Flemington stands for?
Yeah, I mean, it's just different, right? It's just another party that we work closely with to ensure we deliver an unbelievable day for, I think, probably 50,000 people. So, no, we're all thrilled and excited about the opportunity that exists there.
Yeah. I remember, I said when we spoke last March, you said you felt like you climbed a bit of a mountain at that point and that you could see beyond to the immediate and urgent challenges. Does it still feel like that, or did the top of that mountain just prove to be the bottom of another one and you sort of have to climb the next one, Kylie?
Running any business, there's always challenges ahead, but we've come a long way in 18 months. We have had an $18 million turnaround in our finances.
Yeah.
We equally focus on prudent cost management as well as revenue generation. We are tracking to make a net profit this year.
Yeah.
And we have real momentum, real positive momentum. And I talk to my teams about that regularly. Momentum can work either way, and it can work for you and it can work against you. And right now we have positive momentum and we're going to work hard on that.
Just sort of a final one there on Kylie. I mean, we can work on what you can work in. The industry has broader challenges. Yeah, there's broader, obviously, wagering challenges. There's societal stuff, all that sort of stuff. I mean, how much do you guys sort of consider that and work with that and think that sort of it's your responsibility as well to have RV to a certain extent and broader us? I mean, how do you work on that?
My work, our responsibility, and we work hand in glove with RV on that. And our new purpose at the club is to celebrate that special connection between human and horse.
Yeah.
And to celebrate the horse and to ensure we have a social license and that we work with our local community and the community around Australia to celebrate racing. It's a big part of what we do. We invest heavily in that and we work hand in glove with Racing Victoria on that.
So just looking forward to 2030, I mean, we look forward like the next 5 years or 4 years, whatever it is now. I mean, what changes do we see? What do you want to, like, what changes do we see at Flemington? What is the fundamental difference that people would see from the outside?
I think physically you're going to see a very different Flemington by 2030. What that looks like, I can't articulate today, but it will be a precinct that Australians love, and it'll be a precinct that is known for its community programs and its sporting and entertainment options. I would like to think there are permanent restaurants. I would like to think we have pedestrian bridges connecting Footscray Park to Flemington. These are examples only, but it is bringing to life 127 hectares and having a thriving racing calendar amongst.
Yeah, really interesting chat there with Kylie Rogers, Tim. I felt like, she's very good at, putting forward the corporate dream and what they're trying to achieve and everything else. But it's just a really interesting time in Melbourne racing or where it sits. We've obviously got, the MRC and their ambition and challenges. We've got the Moonee Valley and their massive renovation. And we've got the VRC. And, Flemington is the spotlight of the racing world for 1 week a year, particularly 1 day a year. We can't deny that. Its importance in the Australian landscape is massive. When you look at a big city like Melbourne with all the ups and downs and opportunities and challenges that presents, it's a massive wedge of land that sits there and occupies this space. And her desire to sort of activate it for 365 days a year, you can't. You can see why they want to do that. They have to make it a community asset, not just an asset for the racing industry.
Sure that, that stand we've spent time up there to sort of the top level. It is expensive to open and run, and that's why certain areas are closed, obviously. But when the weather's right and, good race days, it is a lot of fun up on that stand and, you can have a good time, obviously betting and things like that. There is some challenges around that, but overall, my experience of going to Flemington for, you know, on and off for 25 years at least, I mean, probably 30 years, I've enjoyed it. And I think, most punters will. Yes, you can whinge and carry on at times, but overall, I've always had a good experience at Flemington.
Yeah, and change is inevitable across the board in every industry, especially racing. And like I'm fortunate enough to go to the Stradbroke on Saturday, where I'll be, probably standing up near the old John Power stand, which is being condemned as of next month, and will be knocked down. So things do change, and I understand it's up to the racing industry to meet those changes. Speaking of changes, Tim, syndication changes mooted in the syndication space. A story I've sort of been covering across the last little bit. First of all, there was sort of a suggestion that from ASIC, who sort of oversee the overall regulation of syndication in Australia, but sort of handed off to the PRAs to sort of administrate, I suppose. They aren't that keen to see major changes to what's going on, but we're able to get our hands on a submission that Racing Australia put forward, and which is suggesting that I guess compliance standards, things like PDSs and Australian Financial Services Licence, which syndicators who syndicate horses under $500,000 of value currently have to have, will become, or the Racing Australia wants to sort of lower those requirements. There's two streams to this story, Tim. There's probably the one which says good ownership, open up ownership more, make it more competitive. Syndication's been a great strength for Australia. If you lower compliance, more people are going to want to participate. The other one is probably the people that are more concerned about the fact, what does that mean around compliance standards and the standards for the industry? I mean, can you see both sides of the story here, Tim? It is a matter of balance, isn't it?
Definitely. I guess there was the concern when Brendan, when you first wrote the story, it was quite a few months ago, I think, that maybe ASIC would crack right down and basically force trainers to, get PDSs and have to get approval, which would really stifle the market. I think that would be a step too far. Com- And on the other side, the syndicators have to abide by all these rules. I have when the trainer and, private partnerships can be formed and sort of at a disadvantage. But syndicators, certainly publicly, the one, well, we know quite a few of them and speak to them, but certainly publicly, they're not going to come out and I don't think call for mass, for more regulation of the whole industry because they need to work with trainers at the end of the day. They are sort of, one doesn't survive without the other mostly. So, yeah, I think this might be a happy outcome. I'm sure as long as Racing Australia, if ASIC go down this route, and the PRAs try and do their best to weed out the bad eggs, I guess. I mean, you don't want too many people having a bad experience because you just can turn them off for life.
Yeah, yeah. It's an interesting one. Like I said, the $500,000 limit has been in place for 10 years. It was previously $250,000 from 2016. There's an argument that could lift again. There's various other things, but Racing Australia are taking feedback via the PRAs, and they'll put a full submission to ASIC. I think the deadline for that, I believe, is in a couple of weeks' time in terms of that, and then the instrument itself, which ASIC does, expires on October 1st. So probably going to see action in this another story. Got a lot of reaction on social media and various other people talking about the story, Tim, which I think a lot of people have had good and bad experiences with syndicators in Australia. It's the nature of the way things work. You can't please everyone, as I think Kylie Rogers said in her interview, but there's always a challenge around that too. One of the other racing things I wanted to raise, Tim, is we've seen Queensland announce this week they'll have 14 fewer meetings this week. That comes to the back of Tassie saying it in the last couple of weeks that they're reducing the amount of meetings by 5 and what they're doing. Victoria has cut the amount of meetings slightly that it's been using. It's putting on the profitability and commercial, I guess, reality of these meetings is becoming very much in the spotlight, Tim. I mean, where does this end? Is there a sweet spot, do you feel, that we can sort of get to where they're getting, you know, wagering engagement that they want and the time slots that they want, and and they can sustain the level of race clubs, etc., that they need to be able to do?
Well, we've spoken about this before, but Queensland probably, well, more than any other state, just the size of the state and the vast regions that they race in, a lot of non-tab venues, right up, if you look at certainly you probably think Townsville and Cairns or Mackay, it's the same region, like, like the Hunter Valley, but trainers are travelling 8 hours or, from Rockhampton to Townsville, sort of 9-hour round each way, things like that. It's a huge area and trying to so cutting down some of the meetings I can understand. It's just probably trying to get, from what I read and have witnessed myself, is trying to get the race dates most opportune time to attract fields and maximise field sizes, therefore wagering turnover, and that's what Racing Queensland are trying to do, is trying to encourage more turnover and, can maintain, or, certainly maintain prize money levels and improve that as much as they can.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're moving towards, and it's probably an indication what happened in Tasmania and probably Queensland, Victoria maybe a bit the same, is there probably is a preference now to have like, fewer meetings but longer meetings, so an extra race here or there in order to sort of, make up the total volume of racing. Now that's you understand why that's happened because obviously it costs you a set cost to put on a meeting, and then if you can maximise that across those things, then you make that work. So it's an interesting one. I think that there's a bit to work through there, and I think we'll probably see it continue to get to a point where they're trying to optimise, and wagering outcomes are a key part of that as well. The final one I want to talk about, the racing space, Tim, and probably you and I. It's sort of a funny one, isn't it? Warwick Barr wrote a story a couple of weeks ago about horses that are contested derbies in Australia, and that I guess the challenge of having 4 Group 1 derbies, the distances, all that sort of stuff. It's turned into a specific discussion between Mick Sharkey wrote a piece for us as a letter to the editor, and Matt Kamani published a piece which he kindly let us republish as well, with sort of a defence of the Victoria Derby, become a discussion about that race. Look, it's a tough one, Tim. I see that it comes back to the fact of innovation and tradition. Like, do we is the tradition of the Group 1 2,500 metre, 2,400 metre derby, is it the one that's going to sustain Australia moving forward and where we're at? I mean, it's a hard one to sort of know which side of the fence to sit on, isn't it?
The beauty of this debate now is we can rerun those letters and things in sort of late October before Derby Day. We've got some free content there, which we'll be looking forward to. Look, it is an interesting debate. I think, as we've spoken to Matt and Mick Sharkey at times about this issue before. He's written a letter, and as we know, the breeding industry, it's heading towards more speed, or the owners, it's commercial realities. People don't have the patience they once used to. It's expensive to have a horse in training, and I think a major factor is even the New Zealand, where you probably traditionally go and get a lot of those potential Oaks and Derbies horses. Their industry is contracting in terms of stallion power, and nothing against the stallions. Sort of State's doing a great job and probably be one of the most popular this year. But he's a son of Snitzel. You'd think he's not going to produce too many stayers. He might with the Savabeel mares and so forth, but as a rule, he's going to get sprinter milers, you'd think, more so. And so it's just that the options are available there's not that many out there. And, maybe I'm one for tradition, and, if the Derby gets downgraded to Group 2, does that really matter? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe not to me. But if the pressure does come from the Asian Patent Committee to downgrade it, maybe that's when the VRC and Racing Victoria will act and go, okay, we'll reduce the race to 2,000 metres. And I think also the Spring Champion, which is the week before, ideally needs to be moved 2 weeks before, so it can be a feeder race. They can both, the Sydney horses can come down to the Derby and and as well as the traditional Victorian leads up at Geelong and the Vars at Moonee Valley and things like that.
Yeah, it's certainly changed a few things, hasn't it? I mean, I think the nature of the pattern and the way things have worked over years hasn't played in the Victoria Derby's favour. The other thing too is that I guess that quest to retain that Group 1 status often means that horses that run second and third in those races get massively penalised on ratings and have to carry much bigger weights coming forward into their late, particularly in their 4-year-old career. You look at a horse like, I think I've used this example before, a horse like Scary, who's ran second in the Derby behind Gold Rush Guru. It gets up to like 95 on the rating scale and hasn't won a race since. Now, it's run some really good races. I think it ran second or third in a Moonee Valley Cup and whatever else. But yeah, if you've got an up and coming stayer, it's almost arguably better off saying, well, I don't want to risk it running second or third in the Derby. The prize money would be great, but I won't win another race with it. It makes it hard for those to place those horses coming forward, particularly because it's 4-year-olds and now contesting against the older age horses and the European horses coming across. So I think probably if Australia could sort this stuff out, it'd be great to actually have a proper pathway, and maybe even, Tim, heaven forbid, some 4-year-old racing to, protect those horses as they come through, to give us more incentive. So we've got, incentive for people to race horses as stayers as 3-year-olds, with a view to them probably getting a little bit of, a help as a 4-year-old as well. But we'll see how that pans out. The following segment is brought to you by Inglis. The Group 1 Goodwood Handicap winner Reserve Bank will be offered as a stallion prospect through a private online sale to be conducted by Inglis next week. Reserve Bank is one of only 10 colts to win an open age Group 1 in Australia over 1,400 metres or less since 2018. Of those, 8 are either currently standing at stud or will be from this season. 4 of them have had runners: Alabama Express, Bivouac, Home Affairs and Trapeze Artist, each having already produced at least one Group 1 winner. The Son of Capitalist will be the inaugural offering through the Inglis Bullery, a private auction platform, participation in which is by invitation only. The Reserve Bank sale will open for bidding next Wednesday, June 17 at 9 a.m, with the final countdown of bidding to start from 4 p.m. the following day, Thursday, June 18. For all the details, go to inglis.com.au. Looking at the private mares market, something we alluded to last week about whether it's some of this investment is moving to the private mare space and what that looks like. I mean, what are you discovering as you're talking to, without giving away your story too much, as you've spoken to sort of bloodstock agents and a variety of sort of salespeople, et cetera, across Australia? What are you discovering, Tim?
Well, yeah, basically the private mares market has collapsed, understandably, just with the advent of digital and Magic Millions now, and Inglis and even Gavel House in New Zealand as well. Yes, there was Streisand, as we keep alluding to, was a high-priced private purchase by Yulong, and they bought quite a few race fillies, well written, and part shares and things like that. But overall, particularly for breeding stock, sort of hasn't been that much trade. It's just much easier and more transparent to trade online. But what was interesting, particularly Craig Rounsfell of Boomer Bloodstock pointed out, because trade so regularly and sales are every week now between Magic Millions and Inglis, there's not a lot of time to do due diligence. And if you are buying breeding stock and brood mares, there is a lot of effort and time required to do your due diligence properly. And Boomer suggested that he's had clients and hearing elsewhere as well that the breeders and people sort of playing in that market are now prepared to pay again for agents to help with doing their due diligence. They might have seen the mare as a yearling, seen yearlings that they've already thrown and weanlings, and can get a guide on the types they're throwing, and also just the nous roundabout, hearing what's in the stables, how they're going, things like that. Buyers are starting to pay for that advice again, which I think is, well, clearly good for the agents. And because it is, if you get one wrong or you sort of weren't aware of something, and then it's very costly to breed. So for that little bit of cost at the start, it can save you a lot of money later on.
We'll look forward to reading that one, Tim. I just want to sort of pivot off to that one. That obviously someone has been involved in the mares market and it's come out and been involved and has been a key success story at Sedge and Ho. Obviously, Coolmore before then, dealing with some of Australia's best mares, all that sort of stuff. Peter O'Brien. Now, Peter O'Brien freelancer, by the look of things, his bloodstock interest is going out. We know Peter quite well, and he's obviously a very well revered and respected character within the industry. We shared a couple of beers with him a few months ago when he had a successful day in the punt, which he was very happy about. But interesting to see Peter more involved there. We always know that he sort of has been involved in a few deals here or there, but Sedge and Ho has obviously been his driving force. You expect to see him sort of playing in a significant role in the market moving forward, Tim?
Definitely, there's obviously, he's Irish, and whether he spends some time in Ireland, I'm sure he does, but I'm sure he's, from what I understand, and maybe we should get him on the podcast one week, that he's going to certainly stay involved in Australia and probably live here most of the year. For someone with his knowledge, it'd be sad if it was lost, and I think he does have a lot of clients that respect him, trust his views. He's very good at picking where horses should go, matings, all that sort of. That's knowledge you can't buy, or you can pay him for it, but to acquire that knowledge yourself, very difficult. So it's those sort of people that make the industry interesting, and again, do very well, with their knowledge, and can point you in the right direction. You still need some luck and things like that, but they can help you cut out a lot of the risk with guys like Peter O'Brien, and there's others, but certainly Peter.
Yeah, and obviously he had a good result yesterday, selling a mare online for the races. Ricky and Ricardo race La Mexicana, I believe the name was $920,000. So it's a good result there. And if that's what we're going to see for Peter going forward, he can certainly look forward to more phone calls from us, which he's not always keen to take sometimes, Peter. He's often very busy and happy to have a chat when he's up for it, but when he's not, you certainly know that's the case. Moving on now, and an interesting announcement earlier this week that Newgate will take on a Wodeton as a stallion option, which is obviously he's a Coolmore Coolmore bought Colt as part of a deal between Coolmore and Newgate. We obviously knew that there's a connection between Henry Field and Coolmore, Henry having worked there many years ago and sort of cut his teeth in the industry around that space. It's an interesting deal. We can talk about the horse himself in a minute, but the deal itself, Tim, did it surprise you?
I guess on face value initially, but you know, a stallion farm like Newgate and the others of scale, they need fresh blood or new stallions regularly. They didn't have one last year, and we're looking like they weren't going to have one this year. And they had, obviously militarised a few years ago, didn't work out, unfortunately. So having Wodeton sort of fill a gap, I think. Having people like to breed to young stallions or the proven, and so that gap in between second, third, fourth, fifth year, some of the breeders, some of their clients are probably going, well, I can't go to those stallions this year. I'm already too exposed or well exposed. So I can see the thinking behind it. And Coolmore, conversely, have got a lot of young stallions, and they've got home affairs that they're getting right behind, and they've paid a lot of money for Super Seth and Shinzo and Switzerland as well to support. So again, as big as they are, there's only so many mares to go around. So I can see the merit in the deal and be interested to see how it turns out.
Yeah, and the horse himself, there's plenty of debate about him. She ran second at a Golden Slipper, but never won a stakes race. Won his maiden and sort of never didn't win. I think didn't win a race after that. But like I don't know. It's kind of interesting if people say, "Oh, well, should we have those sort of stallions going to stud?" Well, if you only have Group 1 winners going to stud, you have a very small stallion pool. That's the first argument. The second argument is that the stud book is full of successful stallions that didn't win Group 1 races, or when there's obvious ones. But the profile that probably looks most like is a horse like Written Tycoon, who, won, I think, 2 of his first 3 starts, but didn't, run the Golden Slipper, ran in good races, but never really sort of kicked on from a racing perspective. Obviously, started from the ground up as a stallion and became a champion stallion. Yeah, I mean, in the end, it'll come down to the fact about what his progeny do on the track. And, I sort of don't get this sentiment that, oh, no, we shouldn't be standing these type of stallions or whatever else. I mean, what are we going to end up standing, Tim? I said, well, there's not enough Group 1 winning colts in the land to be able to fill out, the amount of things we've got. So I kind of don't understand the attitude. Either you pay the $16,500 or you don't. That's an opinion. That's fine. But he's still got a right to stay and stand at stud.
No one's forcing you to send a mare there, and you can, if you believe so strongly and can be so adamant that the stallion will or won't work, there's nothing you can go. There's an edge there and going, well, I'm not. There's 100 yearlings a year I'm going to wipe out that are no chance, or what. There's all different edges that you can pursue if that's your belief. I don't know anyone that can be too hard and fast at this stage of a stallion's career, and I also think Wooden Bassett, obviously very high profile when he came, very expensive purchase for Coolmore, that his expectations were probably too high. So, and that's just the way it worked out. So there was such high expectations that they needed those regular city winners and Group 1 horses and group horses, and maybe didn't match them to the expectations that many people had. But I still don't think he's terrible down here. He's actually quite reasonable.
He's got a Group 1 winner in his first crop. He's got a Group 1 winner in his first crop, Tim, so he hasn't done too badly. So
yeah, that's right. And I think there's a lot of nice horses out there that mightn't end up Group 1, but you'd love to own and race. So I think it's a sideline that's worth persisting with. He did have the talent. So,
he had the looks
a well above average talent. Yeah. You can debate how high or whatever, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's certainly a chance. I'm not going to pot him at this stage. I'm not that bold.
Yeah, and I know there's always the things like, but if you're going to take on a stallion at $16,500, which is, at the sort of lower end of the commercial level, you also know that, when they do come to the sales, he's a very good looking horse. So you're going to have the probably right physical product. Whether the long term that works out for you, it's up to you. But if you're talking from a commercial point of view, also that, those Newgate clients and those Coolmore clients are going to support the horse as well. So you've got that sort of power within that. So look, I don't know. If you look at it I can understand why people might have some cynicism from a performance point of view, race performance point of view. But if you look at it from a commercial point of view, it makes sense to me. And as I said, you can't, you got to have, we've got fewer stallions than ever before. We're going to have some of them standing at stud. Speaking of stallions standing at stud, Tim, the one I wanted to round off on is, was alluded to before in the live read, but Reserve Bank's going up for sale next week. You've had a brief chat with Nick Melmoth from English Digital about sort of this concept of the bull ring and what it means and all that sort of stuff. But I find it really interesting. We've got a son of capitalist, Group 1 winning 3-year-old who's now being offered on a platform. I think Yulong is already in the ownership, but obviously, it'd be interesting to see what this ends up like and where he ends up standing.
Sure, yeah. So he's 4-year-old. I think, things probably just didn't pan out post the Goodwood last year. A few little barrier issues and different things, I think, that sort of prevented him getting the track too often. But this is a concept probably that realistically, it probably dates back to the great, I was just Googling it before, the Dane Hill, Coolmore v Massara and Arrowfield for Dane Hill in 1994, where there was a sort of 4.5 hour bidding back and forth to who was going to buy him, and ended up being John Magner for sort of, for what I ascertain, $18.2 million US dollars. So that's sort of the genesis of this concept, I think. And when it's not like the normal English or Magic Millions, where we'll be able to watch the countdown. You have to be invited, or you have to put forward your level of interest, and then get invited into the digital auction space, I guess. And then the bidding will happen. But if you haven't bid for a while, or it's gone past your threshold, you'll be cut out. So you won't be able to see the ongoing bidding and who's on, and or who's bidding. But sort of that, it's which talked about the private mares market. It's basically the private stallion deals, like Guest House got done after the Slipper. It's that, yeah, through using a digital auction platform, and Inglis has come up with this. It'll be interesting to see how it goes, and how much information we can get afterwards. Presumably, the buyer will want to let everyone know where he's going to be standing, but how much they
Eventually,
paid.
Tim. Eventually, we have to eventually, because we're going to have to see where he ends up. So
Yeah, but he won't be. Whether we get the actual price they paid is another thing altogether. We might be able to work it out with the service fee roughly, but that's part of the thinking behind the process. I'm sure it won't be every week, or certainly every fortnight, but on special cases, I'm sure it'll work.
the straight bloodstock not going to make a bit. There's some lovely land up around Wagga you can stand a stallion on, Tim. I don't know if you're keen to cast your eye about a little bit, but maybe we can start up our operational reserve bank and go from there. Any thoughts around that?
You can stand him in Tassie by yourself, I think, there, Brent.
There's not enough room in my backyard at the moment to house a Group 1 winning stallion. I think I'll leave that for now, but interesting one nonetheless. The following segment is brought to you by Darley. The Darley roster is one of the real talking points this season, and the numbers show why. New for 2026 are Taurus and Observer, two exciting additions to a 16-strong roster. Across the group, you're looking at 43 Group 1 wins, 81 Group wins, 87 Stakes wins, 12 Champions titles, and 8 race or track records broken. And when you're a breeder, that's exactly what you want to see. Horses with the race records, the quality and the substance to give you confidence. Go to darley.com.au for further details. Finally, Tim, on wagering, and always a matter close to our heart. It's an interesting one this week, little take. I guess we're taking a little detour down the world of sports betting, and particularly the World Cup, which starts tomorrow in the United States, Mexico and Canada. An event close to my heart. I was fortunate enough as a much younger journo, to go to a couple of World Cups and follow the Socceroos and follow the action over there in Germany and South Africa. And it's an amazing event. But I think what we probably do get in Australia to a certain extent, because we love our sport. We're very focused on what goes on here, but it's a huge betting event. And this year even more so, because we've got an extra 16 teams involved in it. We've got 48 teams. We've got an extra 40 games. Warwick Barr's written a story sort of looking at the scope of the World Cup. According to Tabcorp, it's worth 30 Super Bowls or 20 AFL Grand Finals in terms of betting. Where that sits in terms of Melbourne Cups, I'm not too sure, but it's a significantly huge betting event within Australia. It's the biggest event in the world in terms of betting. What I found interesting, Tim, and you might, I've actually alluded to this in our newsletter today. Make sure you sign up to our newsletters, by the way, to get access to especially our feature newsletters. The big punters, I guess the advantage players, or the people that are smart money, I suppose, they love betting into these tournaments because there is so much quote unquote dumb money that the smart money doesn't affect the market. The liquidity is such, it's enormous, and there's opportunities. And because people are betting on events that only happen once every 4 years, international teams that are very rarely playing each other, there's actually an opportunity within that market. Yeah, it's a much less efficient market than it probably should be, I suppose, and so there's good opportunities with that. Yeah, and so I think there was a quote I included in that newsletter which spoke about that. I'm just trying to actually look it up now. It's a quote from a guy called Ted Knudsen on a podcast I listened to, which I think I mentioned last week, Bet the Process, which is, because there's so much liquidity, it means when the numbers are really wrong, you can get it down to an expected value number because you can't bet enough money in order to change it. That's why it's so awesome. The liquidity is obscene. So the big players in the American market and in the global market will be keen to bet onto the World Cup. The people who are betting for their own team or willing to take my particular betting provider provided me with a free $10 bet on the World Cup, Tim, but they told me who I was going to bet on. So I've now got $20 on Colombia to win a World Cup at $46, which I'm probably not that keen on, but it'll give me something to follow at least anyway during the tournament. But it is interesting how big it becomes. And I guess what the other thing too is from a racing point of view, bringing it back, because we are a racing podcast, it does feed back into liquidity in other markets as well, because people are betting so much into the World Cup market and there's so much enthusiasm. Obviously, it's a quieter time of year with the exception of the Stradbroke coming up and all that sort of stuff. But, the next month or so is probably the quietest time of year for racing. So, it is an opportunity for people to extend their punting sphere. And I guess, Tim, you're probably less of a soccer fan than what I am or a soccer thing than what I am. But does it interest you from a punting point of view?
Not from a punting, but I'll certainly watch it. I think the time zone suits, being the States, they've got I've got the playoffs, NBA playoffs on at the moment, and San Antonio look like they're well in front there. But anyway, so I think that the time zone will help. So I've always tuned into the World Cups years gone past, and we'll do so again. I probably won't be betting on it, but unless there's some sort of suggestion that I really should get involved on a certain bet, or some sort of abstract bet that might be not a rort. I'm not suggesting that, but if there's something a certain winner, I'm happy to get involved.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I was thinking about the market, how much global betting markets have changed, and probably I remember literally going to the TAB and having bets on the swimming at the 2000 Olympics and backing against all the Australian swimmers because they were ridiculously under the odds. I've mentioned it before, but the American swimmer Misty Hyman, the well-known Misty Hyman, was able to cause an upset. I think it was in the butterfly from memory. Got a nice little collect then, which I've never forgotten about. But these days, they're global markets and they change the way things are. Talking about global markets, Tim, I think this feeds into the fact that I think $60 billion will be bet legally on the World Cup, and there'll be a lot more money bet, I guess, illegally doesn't sound the right word, through non-regulated or black market channels. And that's another concern. I'll raise that briefly. We talked about it a bit on the Straight Over the Journey, but the British, I guess the people that, the British equivalent of Responsible Wagering Australia, I suppose, have come out and outlined a 5-point plan. There's an article there sort of outlining what they see is important about illegal betting and how that's worked. We know how that's affected the racing market in Australia. I think it's estimated about 1 in every 7 bets in Australia is now on racing in Australia is taken on an illegal offshore provider. It is a concern for the industry. It is a concern for governments. We're obviously going to see the government make some changes as well around that. The other thing that the federal government are looking to make changes on is trade promotions and where they work. There's been some interest and some participation from some of the wagering heavy hitters in that space. Obviously, LMCT, Adrian Portelli's outfit's probably the most well-known of them in that space, but the government will be cracking down on that as well as the wagering changes, the wagering ads and everything else. We'll keep you up to date with all that, but it is significant developments in the wagering industry. Tim, any other shout-outs or anything else you want to give before we head off for this week?
No, pretty quiet this week, Brent.
No, nothing to, no one to greet. That's great. Okay, thanks for joining us on Straight Talk, brought to you by our fabulous sponsors, Darley and Inglis. Don't forget to give us a rating wherever you're listening to our podcast. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to sign up to our newsletters on the Straight. And be sure to become a member as well. We're really sort of driving people towards membership at the moment. You will have noticed that but our articles are now, 50% of our articles now behind what we term as a hard paywall, or pretty much that people don't get free access. You have to pay to access at least 50% of our content. That helps pay for our journalism. We've obviously got sponsorship and all those sorts of things, but it helps us, do what we need to do from day to day. Less than a cup of coffee a week. I think it's definitely worth your while. But of course, I'd say that it's we run the place, don't we, Tim? Anyway, send us an email if you've got any queries or questions at editorthestraight.com.au. Thanks for your time, and we'll speak to you again